But other than the filibuster, as I suggest in the book, I would urge you to forget that the Senate exists. I know it does, but forget it. And the president with it. And focus on the House of Representatives, because our activism, our agitation, our lobbying has some chance. You know, it's a very unfair, unlikely, snowballs in hell chance, but we have some chance of influencing what people do in the House of Representatives. And it's very, very difficult with senators. And it's almost impossible with presidents. And so, you know, much as I prefer Mr. President end the wars to Mr. President fight the wars, I consider both equally catastrophically dangerous things to say, because a president shouldn't have these powers, and silly and a waste, because we can't influence a president, but we can influence House members, and we have to. There are, in January there were 22, in February 65, in March there'll be over 100 vigils on the third Wednesday of the month. This will be March 17th. Brown bag lunch vigils at noon. Bring your lunch in a brown bag. This is brown baggers as an alternative to tea baggers. And this is going to Congress members' district offices. You don't have to go to Washington. Go to your Congress members' district office. And this is was happening in January and February in a lot of districts in Massachusetts, including sitting in and not leaving, and winning commitments, including a commitment from Mr. Delahunt to hold a public forum on the topic. Not a commitment yet to vote no, but a commitment to hold a public forum on the topic of war funding. And the demand at these vigils is to commit to voting no on the war money. And most of these people claim to oppose these wars, but keep funding them, right? And Congressman Frank is to be credited with raising the topic of how we could easily cut 25% of the military budget and not feel it. But he's got to stop voting another $33 billion for the wars every time. You know, I mean, this is where the rubber hits the road. You know, nobody's giving him any hell about the 25% off the military budget, because nobody thinks it's going to happen. Congressman Frank, who just, you know, coughs or mentions a bank's name and he's on TV, he had a press conference in D.C. with his proposal for the 25% cut, and there was not a single reporter. Not a single reporter. Right? So they're not worrying. Nobody's sweating about that. Nobody's threatening to end his career over that. But when they don't vote for the war money, they catch hell. Well, they have to catch hell from us when they do vote for the war money. And that means build this thing. Go to pdamerica.org, Progressive Democrats of America, or United for Peace and Justice, Code Pink, all of the peace groups that are doing this, and be there on March 17th. What if Congress really wanted to end the wars? What would it do? What would be the procedure it would go through?
And you could stop.
What kind of a bill would they write?
Just a minute.
Because there are a lot of good bills, right? There's a bill to say we really don't like this funding. There's a bill to say we should have a war tax to pay for this. There's a bill to say we don't want an escalation in Afghanistan, keep it at the current illegal, disastrous level. There's a bill, Congressman Kucinich is about to put in a resolution to just say end the war in Afghanistan. These are all lovely, lovely sentiments. But if you actually wanted to end the war, what would you do? Would you pass a bill saying we don't want to fund the war?
Defund the CIA, first of all. I mean, what's your view of the fact?
Yes, well, I want to get to all kinds of questions and answers. I'm sorry to have started that early, but my point, which I took to be a fairly simple one, is you just stop funding it. And if just the House alone stops funding it, then you don't have to pass a bill. And if you do pass a bill, no matter how beautiful the bill is, you have to get it through the Senate and the President, which isn't going to happen. And so the demand you want to make of your Congress members in the House, again, ignoring the existence of the Senate and the President, is commit to voting no on the war money. Then they don't have to pass anything. And the same goes with any issue, like health care. You want them to vote no on these bills that are worse than nothing. That's what we need. And redo it. And in the case of health care and most other issues, fix it at the state level. Or in the case of Massachusetts, refix it in a good way at the state level. But it's at the local and state level that we can get things done. It's at the state level that we're going to get health care. It was at the provincial level that Canada got health care. You know, the job in Washington is for the House to stop them making it worse. And if you want oversight of the government, you don't need the Senate. You only need the House. Which brings me to the second thing that happened yesterday, which was a hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee about torture lawyers who legalize things like torture. Now, these guys legalized aggressive wars at the whim of any future president. They legalized warrantless spying. They legalized lawless imprisonment without any process. Torture is the sexy one, and they don't want to mention wars. So it's all about torture. And they had a hearing about torture lawyers, about a guy named John Yoo, a guy named Jay Bybee, and you know, I think relevant would have also been a guy at the Justice Department named David Margolis, who wrote a little report saying, well, yeah, it's true they did all this, but let them go, don't cause them any trouble, they're good people. And what was interesting about this hearing was the people who weren't at it.
Oh, yeah. They weren't there.
John Yoo wasn't there. Jay Bybee wasn't there. David Margolis wasn't there. Any idea why none of the relevant people are in a hearing that the Senate Judiciary Committee is holding about torture?
Because they're not serious. The people running the hearing aren't serious.
Yes, that is certainly true, but I want to give a specific explanation that if you didn't hear, they're not serious. They're not really after holding anyone accountable or ending torture. But the reason that they didn't bring you and Bybee in, which they could have done without being serious, is that Congress no longer has the power of subpoena. And if you no longer have the power of subpoena, you can't make anybody come in. And, you know, if somebody knocks on your door and says, here's a subpoena, and you tell them to go Dick Cheney themselves, you're going to jail, right? You are going to be in jail. But during 2007, 2008, when you finally had a Democratic Congress and you still had a Republican president, you know, these being the two main institutions of our government now, the two parties that have replaced those three branches you might have heard about in elementary school, you had subpoenas flying, dozens of subpoenas to top Bush officials and former Bush officials, including Mr. Cheney, who all said, you know, by some coincidence, they all had to go golfing or shoe shopping, or in the case of Ms. Condoleezza Rice, she just wasn't inclined to show up. So they didn't comply. They didn't comply. Now, who knows what inherent contempt is? Somebody's nodding their head. One person.
I've read your book.
You read my book. Anybody who hasn't read my book know what inherent contempt is, other than that feeling in your stomach when Karl Rove comes on television? Any congressional committee has the power to subpoena anybody and lock them up in jail on Capitol Hill, to hold them in contempt, literally hold them in a jail cell. This is the procedure that was used for the better part of U.S. history. And they hold them until they testify to the satisfaction of the committee. Not just, I do not recall, sir, I do not recall, sir, but to the satisfaction of the committee. This was known for the better part of U.S. history as inherent in the rights of the primary, most powerful branch of our government to preserve its own existence. 75 years ago, Congress did what it always does. They pretended to strengthen something and weakened it. You know, like with the War Powers Act. Lots of examples in the book and elsewhere. But they made it a statutory crime, a contempt of Congress. They'll have the Justice Department enforce it. And then Bush and Cheney are in town, and they start subpoenaing, among others, employees of the Justice Department and former employees of the Justice Department. And they're told to go to hell. The United States Congress is effectively told to go jump in a lake. And so what do? Does a single committee even consider enforcing a subpoena itself? They take them to court. Hey, well, there's a real branch of government. We'll take the Justice Department to court. Well, still, with the exception of this weird secret agreement with Karl Rove to partially comply with a subpoena and testify in private, not under oath, and so forth. Not a single one of these people has been re-subpoenaed in 2009, 2010. For the simple reason that the new Justice Department won't enforce subpoenas any more than the previous one, not against people that it's trying to protect. And no committee has sprouted any of those things that John Yoo thinks a president has the right to crush. And so they don't have the nerve to do it. So they don't subpoena anybody, and they hold hearings on people's crimes without the criminals there. So this is the charade they went through yesterday. And because there's no accountability, because these people are not being investigated, impeached, prosecuted, disbarred, they're lawyers, Jay Bybee's a judge on an appeals court, the crimes are ongoing. The illegal aggressive wars are ongoing and expanding. The use of unmanned drones expanding dramatically, which John Yoo is just cheering for. He not for the precision of them, but for the illegality of them, for the incredible illegality of the torture is ongoing. The current White House maintains it can torture if it wants to. It's choosing not to, even though torture is ongoing because people know they won't be prosecuted. The war powers are claimed by the president in a Nobel Peace Prize speech. The power to lock people up without habeas corpus is announced in front of the Constitution in the National Archives. Right? This stuff would not be happening if there was accountability for the same crimes in the recent years. The Director of National Intelligence, Dennis Blair, recently went in on the House side and said that the intelligence agencies, as we still call them, can assassinate Americans as long as they're abroad, right? There's a little bit, some glimmers of outrage, because we assassinate people routinely, but they're not Americans usually. The crime is exactly the same, illegality. But here you have someone from a secret branch of government with a secret budget with no accountability who claims sort of to work for the president, but essentially to work for himself, coming into Congress and telling them what the law is, right? And likely to come in next year and say, oh, well, now we can assassinate Americans in America because, we were in hot pursuit and it didn't make any sense not to go ahead and kill the guy. And that's how we make laws now. Somebody comes in and tells them. John Yoo, as I was sort of referring to, maintained at a public forum like this one that a president can crush a child's testicles if he's so inclined. He maintained in a quote in this report that the Justice Department just released after years of delay that a president can massacre villages if he's so inclined, without regard to domestic or international law or Congress or the Supreme Court or you or me. And asked last week about where this stops, John Yoo said, well, a president can nuke cities if he is so inclined. He can nuke cities, right? So, while they're holding this charade hearing yesterday without John Yoo there, and they have one witness, an assistant deputy attorney general from the Justice Department, one guy there to answer questions, they of course are not asking the questions that I want asked, like how many cities? Does he have to stop at 8 cities? Or 9 cities, and do other nations' presidents have these same rights with our cities and villages, and if there were any in Congress, testicles, or is it a U.S. Is it our exceptionalism, right? Is this just for the U.S. and other presidents don't have these powers? But even if it's just the U.S., can we start a nuclear war? Can we destroy humanity and destroy law? And is that legal? They aren't asking this. And finally, Senator Leahy got around to sort of asking the guy, what is the current view of the Justice Department? We know about all these memos, but we don't know if we've seen them all, have we? I don't know, I'll get back to you. We don't know if you've thrown them all out or they're still in effect. Well, I don't know, I'll get back to you. And we want to know, what is your current view? What is the Justice Department's current view on a president's powers? Are they limited in any way? Can a president go massacre villages? I don't know. I'll get back to you. No answer. No answer from the Justice Department. So Congressman John Conyers on the House side has announced that he'll hold hearings too on the torture lawyers. Well, here's the message to take to John Conyers. Put the torture lawyers in the room when you hold the hearing about them. And in the case of Jay Bybee, utilize the central power that Congress has, the number one power discussed more than any other in the Constitution, inserted in the definition of the House of Representatives, and there, as long as it lasts, to preserve our republic as some sort of representative government. The power of impeachment. We impeached a judge last year for groping people. We're impeaching a judge right now for petty corruption. And Jay Bybee has legalized aggressive wars and torture. And he's a judge, and we can't impeach him. This is a message to take to John Conyers, because if we lose the power of subpoena and we lose the power of impeachment, then we lose any power of Congress versus the other branches. And if we got all the power back in Congress tomorrow, I know it wouldn't do us a damn bit of good unless we cleaned up Congress and forced it to represent us. But that two-step process is our only hope, short of a completely new government. So why are these people so terrified to do anything? Why do they all take their orders from the head of their party, who at any given time, for half of Congress, is the guy who was supposed to execute the will of Congress, reversing that relationship? Why do they take orders and never stand up? And you look at someone like Jane Harman, who's been blackmailed, and you wonder how many others. And you look at someone like Senator Leahy, who was sent anthrax, likely by someone within the military-industrial spook complex. But I was reading on the airplane this morning a book about the guy this street out here is named for, called JFK and the Unspeakable by James Douglas, which I highly recommend. And I recommend another book by a guy I know named Russ Baker called Family of Secrets. When John Kennedy turned against the military-industrial complex and the CIA, they killed him. They killed him. The CIA killed him. There is not, a shred of doubt left in the piles of evidence that they killed him. And Johnson knew it, and everybody since has known it. And in fact, when I criticize President Obama, I'm often told at events like this one, but they would kill him. To which I reply, he sends tens of thousands of young people to kill and die for no good reason. If he cannot risk his life, what good is he? What good is any member of Congress who's unwilling to risk their lives while they kill people, other people, in large numbers? So I think the example we should take from John Kennedy is not that he died or how he died, but how he lived, and how he lived at the end, which is not well enough known, and the degree to which he turned against an arms race and the Cold War, and put through a test ban treaty, and opposed the military-industrial complex on Cuba, and on Berlin, and on Laos, and on Vietnam, and began dialogue with Khrushchev and with Castro. And, he gave a speech, and I want to close by just quoting a few words from President Kennedy, but he gave a speech that, they're good speeches all the time, but this was in accordance with his actions, and he meant it. On June 10th, 1963, commencement speech at American University about world peace, about ending the Cold War, about complete disarmament. This is scandalous, heretical language. And he said, "What kind of peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana enforced on the world by American weapons of war, not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and to build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace for all time." So let's keep working on that. Thanks.